Hello, everyone. Hope you're having a nice Tuesday, not Wednesday evening. Sorry we had to switch up the stream this week, but the options were go to Tuesday or no stream. So I felt like it was better to do Tuesday, and we'll also be doing Tuesday next week as well. And then the week after that, we're figuring it out, but I'll be out of town, so we might be able to still make it work, but I've got to figure out some technical concerns there. But before I can introduce, this episode number 2 of Low Brass U Studio class, we're gonna need Mr. Connor Eisenmenger.
Oh, hello.
There he is.
I have returned.
And would you like to tell everyone about your lighting situation, because you're so professional now?
Yeah, not to brag or anything, but yeah, I've sold out. I've gone totally corporate. Not really. Maybe I can move my laptop in such a way that you can see the amazing light
we can see it in your eyes
above my head. Check it out. Oh yeah, if I go like this,
yeah,
you can see it in my eyeglasses. But yeah, my sister-in-law got us a ring light, and so now I'm in showbiz.
Yeah.
So there you have it. Looks great.
As they say, now you're cooking with oil or peanut oil or any other cooking sort of thing.
Now we're cooking with LED.
Yeah, there you go.
I think it's LED. I don't really know, but looks great.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So yeah, we're happy to have Connor back this week. We had a great stream last week with Keith Packman. If you missed that, it's always up there. So if you want to check that out, we talked a lot of tuba last week. Maybe we'll shy away from so many of the tuba-centric topics. But yeah, we talked a lot about some band excerpts last week and some other stuff as well. I wanted to talk with Keith about things that he knew significantly more than I did, which band excerpts is just like, tell me about band excerpts. Also, would you like to introduce our third co-host?
Yeah, we got a third co-host today. Sorry about that. Probably playing with the mic was probably very noisy. My cat is very excited to see me. I've been out of town for a little bit, so it's cat is just going to be part of this today.
Yeah, you're hot off the plane, right? You got in today, is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, we're fresh and we're back.
Yeah,
we're ready to rumble.
Yeah, so had a nice little trip there, doing some music things.
Music related things. Hopefully, I can say more soon. But yeah, good stuff.
That's how showbiz works.
That's showbiz. All right, we're gonna have a moratorium on the cat exploring the laptop.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll make another appearance. Maybe my dog will make the stream at some point. I feel like on a very early stream, my dog may have made an appearance.
Oh yeah,
but I'm not quite sure on that. I usually keep my door shut, and right now she's on a walk. So, but yeah, she's just walking herself around. No, but yeah. So I didn't have a ton of time to kind of think about some topics for today. Real life got in the way. I actually had jury duty today. Although I was not selected, but I still had to go, and not to brag, but I did make a little bit of money. They told me checks in the mail for $6. So yeah, I mean not to brag, but I might be able to get like maybe a third of a bottle of valve oil or something.
Yeah, don't spend that all in one place.
Right. So yeah, I'm a high roller. There's not really much else that can be said. But yeah, so one thing I did want to bring up, and maybe we can do something with it a little bit later on the stream. If I don't know what the rules are, but you had an interesting virtual performance that maybe you want to share. We showed a little bit your last stream on here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to talk more about that. I'm sure we can probably put it up now. At this point, it's probably fine. But yeah, if you weren't keeping score at home, we had the virtual Tuba Euphonium conference. Was last weekend, or was it was 2 weekends ago? That's right, and it went through Wednesday. Actually, I think it was like a Saturday through Wednesday thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that was super duper fun, and I was lucky enough to play on the first night. They had after hours concerts, and it was pretty much for all of the people recording music in genres they didn't know what to do with. It was really, really cool. The other bands that played and the performers, like the same night that I was there, were outstanding. And then other nights were fantastic too. We had Derek Malachek was playing, and
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah, he played a great set. he had like originals, and then he had like even it was like euphonium and tuba euphonium ensemble with rhythm section, and it was super hip. We did an arrangement of Spain. I got to play euphonium 3 on that one, and that was cool. It was really hard.
Three's the
It sounded
premium.
good.
That's first chair, right? That's actually where they put the best player. No,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, they're saying, wow, yeah, it sounds great, Connor. We'll put you over here.
Why don't you play some notes in the staff?
Yeah, it sounded fantastic, and everyone else there was super heavy hitters, and yeah, it was fantastic. It was a wonderful experience. I listened to some great lectures and learned a lot. I learned a lot about the tuba and the euphonium. I learned a lot about teaching. I learned a lot about the community around it. Learned a lot about myself. Learned a lot about how to navigate Zoom, because it was mostly on Zoom, and connected with new tuba players and euphonium players, and said hi to old and new friends like Jose Flores and Matt Kuhnler. They were doing that really great
like the
concerto that he wrote.
Yeah,
it was outstanding. I spent some serious time actually today going back and listening to the third movement that he posted on YouTube, and it's just world class. And also, who's the piano player? It's like Dr. Schumann, I think was her name, the pianist that played. Also, it was just virtuosic all the way around. Just like all 3 parties involved in that were just world class. It was great.
A good pianist really does make all the difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I always get on my students who are always kind of saying things like my accompanist, and it's just like, no, that's your collaborator. You know,
right?
That's not like, they're not just there to help you. They're arguably sometimes more than half of the show.
Yep.
They play a lot
at
more
least
notes
equal
than us.
parts of a whole.
Right.
Yep. Definitely. I thought I cannot speak in any informed or academic sense. Like, I'm not someone who's well versed in like classical repertoire or solo literature, but I felt really engaged on like all sorts of levels, like as far as like listening to the piano playing and how it interacted and served the euphonium and vice versa. Like, there was never a point where I felt like taken away, like out of the experience of like the narrative of the piece as a whole. It just, everything felt really like there was good continuity in the material between. It wasn't like, oh, here's a chord, here's a line on the euphonium, here's a chord, you know. Right. Not that that's normally the case in euphonium solo literature or anything, but it was particularly, it can happen, yeah. But no, it was outstanding. Yeah. Can't say enough good things. Go listen to it.
Yeah, I think Matt put a little bit on Instagram, I want to say. I've heard some of it, but I haven't like done my full research just yet.
I think third movement is the only one that's up on YouTube now, but it sounds good. The recording quality's good.
Nice. Yeah, I actually spoke to him earlier today. It's good to hear from him.
Nice.
He's got some things in the works, as he's always got things in the works. You know, he's one of those people where it's just like, you know, I call him up and it's just like, yeah, I'm doing all these things, and then I realize just like, yeah, I'm doing nothing. You know. Yeah,
he's got an entrepreneurial spirit.
Right.
Which is good to have.
He's on the ball. But yeah, a couple other things that I thought I might, shout out just a little bit with Low Brass U, the YouTube channel. We've got the All-State Jazz videos. Two of them already come out, and the rest will be out this week. I know that
All-State Jazz.
There have been several comments about how the etudes are out, and I haven't released the videos yet. And I just like to remind everyone that I'm not required to do them. I'm actually not eligible to make all-state band in the state of Texas, or any state for that matter.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, for some reason they don't let people who aren't in high school audition for those groups. But I think
we should change that.
I think I got like five or six different comments about just like, when are you doing them? It's just, I'm gonna do them, but keep in mind I don't have to. I just would like to put that out there that I do not have to do them. There's no requirement of me doing them. I choose to do them, and I like doing them. But part of
I wonder how hard it would actually be to get you signed up to audition, to break for All-State.
Yeah, to crack
what's
the
the
code.
vetting process? Do you have to have a school email? Does the band director have to send you in? We can get you in there. We've got connections.
That seems like a very bad idea.
I'm doing it. You're already signed up.
I'm already signed up.
Yep.
But yeah, one of the reasons why it took me a little bit longer to do my videos is because I actually got some great rhythm section players to play on my backing tracks. I know that TMEA does have some of their own backing tracks, but I wanted to spice it up a little bit and have some of my own. So I've got all very good friends. So Matt Peterson on piano, who I played with in the Disney band. Jake Greenberg on bass, who I went to UNT with. Connor Kent, who did both those things, was in the Disney band with me. Well, also Jake did the Disney band, just not the year I did. And also went to UNT. And Connor were actually roommates at Disney. So, and then on the funk bass trombone one, which I think I'm going to release tomorrow, even though I'm kind of already out of order, but that one I like the most. And so I also got my good friend Ben Greenberg to do some guitar work on there.
Oh, nice.
So
that's going to sound great.
Yeah, I think it does sound really great. I just need to edit the video, get the 2 camera angles, get that going, or maybe just be lazy and just do one. But yeah, I've already recorded and everything. Just the final processing stage. But yeah, it sounds really great, and I'm still I'm not the world's greatest mixing engineer, so it probably could sound better. But I'm also making sure that those tracks are available, because part of what I was kind of shooting for with these tracks to anyone who might be interested in using them, I wanted them to kind of be fun to play with. I think that that's an important thing with that sort of stuff, is that just thinking about play-along tracks in general, like we've all had to learn that, that one tune or something, and this is like one play-along track that you can find, and it's just not very good. Or like you just have to use computer-generated stuff like iReal-B or Band in a Box or something, and it's just not very fun to use, and it's utilitarian. Yes, those are the notes in the chord, but it is not in any way inspiring to play over. Right. So I wanted it to be things that were fun to play over. And I also, I had a lot of talks, especially with Connor on drums, not this Connor Kent.
Different Connor.
Connor with an O at the end. And Connor and I kind of talked about, helping someone maybe who's a little less rhythmically inclined, get some of the rhythms out. So like one of the things that I think he did a really tasteful job of, there are a few triplet quarter note sections, or not sections, but just 3 triplet quarter notes or something. And triplet quarter notes, that's one of those rhythms where, if you had to give a percentage, Connor, how often are triplet quarter notes played accurately?
By myself, 15%.
Yeah, just in general,
I think that statistic flies the same.
And even myself, I had to be really on it, and I to be honest, I was fortunate that Connor played the rhythm for me, and he did a really good job of setting up that rhythm. I know there's like one where he subdivides triplet eighth notes, which I always ask this question in lessons, and I always get the most confused looks of how many triplet eighth notes are there in a triplet quarter note. Get a lot of people who say 3, or just a lot of confused looks. And, I understand why that happens. It is a little bit tricky, and it's not something you think about necessarily. But it's
not even necessarily intuitive.
Right, it's really not. And anytime you get any tuplet, sometimes it's just the Wild West. There's so many times I've seen, those sorts of things where it's like, that's not how I would write it. That's I guess that's, I can count up the beats and I can kind of figure it out what you're going for, but that's not what I would do. So yeah, that's one of the things that I've, I think he did a really good job with, and I think these play-along tracks will be pretty helpful for anyone who's working on these etudes. So, we'll see, and I should probably also turn my phone off. The irony.
Yeah, that sounds great, man.
The irony. I got a low brass. You can't see that, and you can't see it back here if it's in focus.
But can't see it either way.
It says low brass U live stream. I guess I didn't answer it quick enough.
Wow.
Because now my phone's just going crazy. But But yeah, the Low Brass U live stream really, the calendar notifications just wanted to be a part of the stream today, I guess. So, but yeah, I think that these play along tracks are fun. I think the etudes are pretty good this year. And I hope that those etudes are pretty helpful. And I tried to, I'm not necessarily a publishing company that knows what they're doing with background tracks and click count offs and things, but I think it's pretty clear what's going on with those. So I hope they're helpful. And I hope that people enjoy those etudes and just kind of talking about a few of the things that are coming up with the channel. I've got the rest of the ATSSB etudes to do, or really just two, the bass trombone and tuba of the technical. We'll pretend like we believe in those, the dichotomy of technical and lyrical. But those two I still have to do, but everyone was asking where the trombone jazz etudes were, so I decided to switch up the order a little bit and not finish those. Especially since all the ATSSB etudes are the same for Texas. Well, not all of them, but all the ones that I'm involved with are the same etudes. But another fun thing that some of you may be aware of, that this is a recent achievement that was unlocked, but Low Brass U is now available for monetization on videos. So,
hey.
So I told a friend this earlier. I've already bought multiple Teslas. I no longer can be reached. You'll have to talk to my business manager. No, I don't think this will change things all that much, but it's a nice little milestone. And we'll see what the future holds. I don't expect that money to be super extreme, but the nice thing is I plan to reinvest it in video stuff and things for the channel, maybe doing some product reviews and things like that.
Definitely.
All of those sorts of things, and just try to bring up the quality as much as possible. It's that's the
ring lights.
Right, the ring lights. That's the side quest. Video gear's expensive. Like a proper video light can cost you $1,500. That's that's okay. But yeah, so we've got that to look forward to. I tried to make it where the ads that come up aren't super invasive or anything. If they are, please let me know. I tried to make it where you might get a pre-roll, you might get one at the end of the video, but especially for a performance or something, like a 10-minute long piece, you shouldn't have a mid-roll ad. I feel like that would be silly,
That would be defeating the purpose.
You're in the middle of a piece, and it's just like, what you should do? You should make a website on Squarespace. That's, we don't need that in the middle of a video.
Right, not the time.
Not the time. But yeah, so one thing that I thought it might be fun to talk about a little bit today, especially because you've had some movement in your trombones that you've owned and things. I thought it might be fun to just kind of recap some of the trombones that both of us have owned, and maybe you could go first and tell everyone your timeline, what horns you switched to for both small and large bore, because I feel like it's been a journey.
Definitely. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that.
So what was your first trombone?
Bach student straight horn rental.
Gotcha.
Loved it.
I don't think I knew that. I don't think we ever really talked about that.
I don't think we ever talked about it. Yeah, I had that horn. That was the only trombone I ever played or ever knew until my sophomore year of high school.
So a pretty long time.
Straight shooter. Yeah, 6th grade all the way through to 10th grade.
Gotcha.
So you have it. Loved it. Wish I still had it. But that was a fun horn. It played great. I had no problems with it. Should have just stayed there. No, just kidding. That was fine.
I mean, people, people say negative things about student horns. It's like, they're not all bad, Right. Ultimately, if you want the very best instrument, yes, top tier money is, a company is going to spend more time with their $5,000 instrument than their $1,200 instrument, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they're all bad. You know,
No, not at all.
it's sometimes you find some actual gems that that are technically student instruments. And I think that I think especially with my like journey, sometimes I was just like I need a better horn that'll make me a better player, and ultimately that's not usually how it works.
Right. Absolutely. And yes, and that was kind of a similar thing of like, oh, I want to sound better. I want to be on a big horn. I want that big horn sound. I didn't even know really necessarily what that was. It was just like I knew like people were telling me like you're not going to be able to play that tiny thing in college.
Right.
They were wrong.
Right.
So then like the first thing I did once I got to the university level was like, oh, I need a pea shooter. And that would be so in sophomore year of high school, I got a what's the numbers for the Yamaha Xeno?
They're like 88 something, right? Because it's like Con 88.
Yeah.
Like,
yes. YSL 880 or something. I can't remember what it is. I should know because I just sold this horn. Just recently left my possession. I was looking at the advertisement that I had made for it for like a year and a half. Great horn. Loved it. It sounded so good. It had like all the things you love about like a Con style large bore horn, and it had a Yamaha slide on it, and it was just woo. It was so much fun. But I didn't really know what I was doing with it. I played it like mostly in like lead trombone and jazz band because at that point I was like, congrats, that's your only horn now.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like ultimately you have to figure out how to do your, I always say do your job. I know we're not, I know playing lead in a big band wasn't your job when you were a college student, but it's like you have to figure out how to do what you need to do with the equipment that you have, and sometimes spending $5,000 on an instrument isn't an option. It's like I could buy other horns. There are other. It's like I played a brass quintet gig recently, and I don't really have a tuba for that. I have a small F tuba and I have a large C tuba. You need something in the middle for brass quintet. Am I going to go spend $12,000 on the tuba that I want? I mean, maybe at some point. But it just wasn't, it's not feasible for me to just go get that for one brass quintet gig or something. So I had to figure out how to play those, either play those low notes well on my F tuba or, not have my C tuba just, be this colossal, unclear mess. But continue.
Right. Oh, yeah. So then we get to college, and like big band stuff is, it's like, it's about a similar relationship to what it was with high school jazz band, like definitely a better group, but it wasn't like I was playing like a lot of big band outside of school or anything like that. But I was getting more tunes gigs and like small group things and stuff like that. Like that was when I really started learning how to read changes and do that thing. And it was like, well, if you're going to go, at that time I was like, maybe I'll go to North Texas. And like, well, if you're going to go to North Texas, you probably should consider like having a small bore to play.
Right.
That might like, hedge your bets a little better. So then I got just a horn on consignment from a local music store. It was an old Super, one of the ones with the fluted slide. That was super fun. And, but yeah, you got to be tricky with those because the fluted slide, it's like a 12-sided prism. And so if you ding it, like your slide is done. So I have no idea how, as like a 19-year-old, I managed to keep that slide in good condition.
Yeah.
And I had that trombone through my first year of grad school.
I believe dodecagon is the shape name.
I think it's a dodecahedron.
Or dodecahedron, that's right.
Yeah, that's right.
You thought
you were gonna.
I know my prefixes. How about that?
Actually, I think you're right. I think it's a dodecagon.
Well, dodecagon would be a two-dimensional shape. I think a dodecahedron is
that's a dice, like a 12-sided dice.
Yeah,
so
right.
I think we're both wrong. Would it be a dodecagonal prism?
Well, but it's not. That dodecagon shape doesn't continue all the way, right? It's just at the stocking.
Yeah.
Or
no.
Whole thing
it's the opposite. The whole thing is dodecagonal, and then at the stocking, it is cylindrical.
I see.
Yeah.
So I think that ultimately, I don't think there's a name for that shape.
Right. It's a compound shape.
Right. It's a compound shape, and I think that dodecagon prism or dodecagonal prism or something.
That's what I said, and I'm sticking with it.
But yeah, I always get on my students about, like, I have a lot of students that'll say like 5-lit, and it's just like, no, there is no 5-lit. It's a quintuplet. And it's like
Quintuplet.
right. There's no, you know, you don't say 3-lit, you don't say 6-lit. It's like those like. It doesn't really matter, and I get that. You know, as long as we all know what we're talking about, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
But those are like those subtleties of, you know, words that sometimes bother me. Just like when people say I'm gonna plus this, it's like no, you're gonna add that. You're not gonna you're not gonna times that. You're gonna multiply. So that's just like I just feel like, especially with music, you know, especially if you're studying in music school, we should probably use more the correct terms.
Sure.
And
you know, I'll side with that.
And occasionally there might be a dodectuplet. You know, we don't see those. We don't see those too often. But theoretically.
Right. I mean, I guess that's what the meter of 12/8 is a dodectuplet as a a grouping.
I would think of that as more being 12 notes in a beat. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, like a true dodectuplet.
But ultimately, I mean, again, we're definitely like splitting hairs. You know, trying to define this a little bit. But so you got the small bore, you got the old super, which is what I kind of like, you know, re-met you. We won't go into that story, but I met you with that instrument.
Yes, and then I don't know why I made the next purchase that I did. I just remember really, really loving the Edwards that you had and thinking that it was awesome. And then you had mentioned that you were going to sell it. And then there was just like some sort of switch that flipped my head that was like, no, I have to have that horn. Like that's happening.
I mean, it was a great horn. And in a lot of ways, like I regret selling it. I mean, I'm glad it went to you, and I'm glad that you still play it and everything. And if I had it right now, I don't know that it would be my main instrument.
Right.
But I wish I still had it, you know?
It's a nice one. It's
nice
great.
One.
Yeah, that's a fun one. And so then I pretty much planted at that point and just played primarily on the Edwards and the Xeno for several years until there was a time where I started taking maybe like a couple of my audition spaces more seriously. And I thought maybe about refining my equipment specifically for that. I don't think I necessarily needed to, but I ended up moving from the Xeno to a Bach 42. I thought maybe it might be fun to explore, you know, what I feel like is kind of shifting to be like the industry standard of American orchestral trombone. And it's fun. And I really, really enjoy the sound of Bach style horns. And so I was like, well, let's do the thing. If the resources are available, let's try it out. So with that came the decision to sell the other large bore because I don't need two. I'm barely good enough at playing one at a time. So I don't need to be balancing any sort of nuance between two styles of, you know, horns. So that was fine.
And also juggling two different instruments with like intonation concerns. It's like, I think people,
it can be tricky.
People take like, it's like, oh, I can play both these horns. Like you can, but like especially different brands, but even just two horns in general, it's like, where is that E flat in comparison to that C? You know, those are subtle differences that, you know, it's not like the end of the world necessarily, but you're much more likely to play a note out of tune or something.
Yep, absolutely.
So
it's a tricky thing. And then on the small bore side, with a similar thing, I kind of wanted a horn that I could bring to like party bands and jobbing and things like that back when I was in Chicago, and not bring the Edwards because I just like had this thought of dropping it or someone picking it up and messing around with it, or, you know, just things can happen when you're like doing some like type of music that's very mobile on a stage.
And we haven't mentioned anything about that horn, but you know, it's a rose brass bell. Like it's, you know, if we're going to use our simple terms that definitely get overused, you know, one would probably call that a darker horn. You know, it's definitely not the most naturally piercing sort of sound that one could get out of a drum. I mean, you can make any instrument sound however you want, but ultimately it's like, you know, you maybe be able to do a job with a sledgehammer that you'd rather do with a hammer. But why wouldn't you use a hammer instead of the sledgehammer? You know, you wouldn't use a sledgehammer to hit some nails in. Technically, you could. And if that's what you want to do, you know. fine. But there are the subtleties. It's not like you should go out and buy another horn. I just want to put that out there, that you shouldn't just go out and buy another horn because the one you have isn't necessarily perfect, because no horn is perfect for everything.
Right. Absolutely.
But it's like, if you're doing one thing a lot, it may make sense to do one specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna throw up an Olaf from Zach. Actually, maybe I'm not going to.
Yeah, what's up, Zach?
Let's try this. How about now? Oh man, it's not working.
Oh no.
I don't know what happened. Sorry. We
Sad
still
day.
we still say hello back, Zach. We just
Yes, peace and love
for
to
whatever
Zach.
for whatever reason, it's not.
The hellos are not working.
Yeah, I'm not gonna worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so that kind of gets us. So I guess you didn't say what you got. You just talked about getting something else.
Yeah, it was a Jigs Wiggum 2B, which is an amazing horn that should be taken care of. It was just like at the price point that I was able to get it used, because I'm a big fan of just like not buying a brand new horn personally for myself. It was, it made sense for that investment to have that horn kind of be allocated to. It ended up serving two functions. It was a great horn that was really, really sturdy and small that I could take on flying around. I could do party band with it. And then it also, so I guess three, it's very mobile, durable for party band, and it sounded great on lead trombone at a time where I was doing a bunch of lead trombone audition type stuff, and it was zippy, and I still have it. I guess it's not, I don't need to speak about this horn in the past tense, but it's a fantastic little horn, and I'm very glad to have it. I hope I never lose this one.
Keith Packman just said, glad to see the chat computer's up and run. Oh, because we couldn't get it to here. I will fix it. It'll just take me a second.
Fix it now.
I can fix it. If everyone just holds on, I think I can make it work. Let's see here. Let's see. Will this work? Yeah. And let me just get rid of the extra trim here. Fixing technical problems on the fly. There.
Very impressed.
So,
you got it working?
But yeah, the chat computer, when Keith was over here, it was doing a Windows update for probably an hour of the stream.
Beautiful.
And then, right at the end, it finally started working, but then the whole capture system didn't work. But yeah, for some, I don't know if there are any OBS gurus in the audience. Maybe some people can, tell me what I'm doing wrong, where I feel like I'm just leaving it and it should be exactly the same as last time, and then it is not, and I have to reset up things even though I feel like I shouldn't have to, but alas. But yes, as Zach said, computers or tech always finds a way to crush your dreams. They really do. And I really try to be good with technology, and I feel like probably it's more complicated than it needs to be the way I do things. I'll admit that. That's definitely a traditional Zach solution to things, is being more complicated than I probably need to be to do it the specific way that no one else would care about, but the way I want to do it. But we're back up and running. Everything is running flawlessly. There are never any problems. Lowbrass U, Studio Class is known for having the most technically flawless stream that's ever existed.
That's right.
The likes of, ABC, ESPN, CBS, they all look up to the quality and the consistency of the streams that we produce. So maybe at one point in time, we'll have a technical producer who can handle everything behind the scenes. But until then, this is what we're stuck with.
That's what we got.
So you got the Jigs Wiggum, and I guess you have one more that you haven't mentioned.
Got the Valve Boy.
Yeah,
absolutely.
If we're including that in our trombone journey.
Absolutely we are. What are you talking about? It's like literally my favorite trombone that I own. It's the Valve. It's so much fun. I don't know why we stopped using the Valve trombone, or like why it didn't pick up.
Because it's very hard to play in tune.
Well, you just gotta lip it around. It's fine.
Yeah,
we need to get little kickers for all the valves. You need little kitty kickers on either side.
Yeah, I've seen that exist before, but the slides are so long that's kind of cumbersome.
Yeah, that makes enough sense.
It's not impossible, but it's definitely not quite as easy as one would want it to be.
Well, that's true. But for small group, it sounds great.
Yeah.
I love playing on the valve trombone, and I hope to do some recording with it here really soon. It's fun. The buttons are great. If anyone tells you that it's not cool to play buttons on a trombone, they're lying to you. That's fake. So yeah, and if anyone here is a euphonium or a tuba player that has even like the slightest, teeniest, tiniest iota of an interest in playing in jazz band, you should ask your band director if they have a valve trombone that you can play, because it sounds just as good. If it was good enough for Duke Ellington, it's good enough for your local band program. So there's my trombone spiel. And the funny thing is, I mean, it's funny. It's incredibly generous. It was just like a donated horn. A friend of the family just gifted the horn. It was a trumpeter who had gotten it used from a school program. There you go, which is where you find a lot of valve trombones anyways. And they were a trumpeter, so they were like dabbling with it. Then they realized like, it takes up a lot of space. Don't really want it. You play it.
Right.
And it's been uphill ever since. Valve Boy Nation.
So that kind of sets me up perfectly to start talking about my trombone journey.
Let's hear your journey.
Because mine actually started with a valve trombone.
Oh, I had no idea.
The first trombone that I owned was a valve trombone. So to put it
When was this?
So this was either 4th or 5th grade. I don't know exactly. But I was playing a baritone at the time, and I was pretty into it. And it was it was a low quality instrument. I would say that, my parents found on eBay. The valves worked. I still, technically I still have it. It's in my parents' basement, where it has remained since I was in 4th grade.
You need to go get that horn.
I don't.
Yes, you do.
And then, so, I was in 4th, 5th grade band, which the way that worked at my school was like basically the middle school band director would come to my elementary school and pull out the kids who wanted to be in band. And so there were like 6 of us. It was quite the eclectic group. And I, with my own money, actually bought this valve trombone on eBay. Also very poor quality. And it remains poor quality. The valves never really moved well. The mouthpiece doesn't take a standard shank at all. The slides, most of them never moved. Not a high quality instrument, but I was super excited about it. And so I played that for a little while. And then, I kind of put childish things aside, and I stopped playing trombone for a few years in any capacity. Until I was a sophomore in high school. And at that point, I wasn't playing any... I didn't own I had that valve trombone still, but, I wasn't playing that. So I was just borrowing whatever I could from the school. So I started playing in jazz band, and I played bass trombone. I think I can't remember the model number, but it was a Benge. And
nice.
I remember because it was like a convertible G or G flat valve.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course,
nice.
I had no idea what any of that meant at that time. I think I mostly played it with the G flat valve because that's how it was, and the slides didn't really move that well.
I wouldn't mess with it.
Right. So I played that for, like a few months, and then I kind of switched to tenor trombone at that point. Still didn't own my own. And so there were 2 different Con 88Hs that I played. One that was close wrap first, and then someone didn't want it, so I took the open wrap because open wrap is better, as like one was told to believe, which, it has its quirks, but
sure.
All my trombones do have open wrap, so maybe I'm just a hypocrite, but there's nothing wrong with closed wrap, especially for a tenor trombone for a lot of situations. It's really a solid option. And I think that closed wrapped one actually sounded better than the open wrapped one, but,
There you go. You heard it first here.
I believed what I thought, not what I heard. But anyway, so I played that for a while, and then I kind of got that small bore itch. And my high school didn't really have any like good small bores, but there was like this student model horn that I found, and so I played that for a little bit. I couldn't even tell you what that was. It was definitely not a good instrument, but it was small and allowed me to play lead a little bit easier. And then I bought that Edwards. I went up to the Edwards factory, and I got that horn that you now own.
Right.
So I got that when I was a junior in high school, and I played that. That was I forgot one. Goodness. I bought my Con 6H on eBay.
Oh yeah,
For $300. And it's
it's such a good horn.
It's, especially when you put a $300 lens on there, and it's just like $300, perfect.
Right.
It's really a great horn. But because it was $300, and this is definitely where I kind of went wrong in some ways. I wouldn't say that I went terribly wrong, but I think that this is probably relevant to some viewers who might be younger players who are maybe salivating over a very nice horn that they can, some shiny instrument that they can find on the internet that it's, it's $3,000, so it must be good, right? That $3,000 Edwards should be 10 times the horn of my Con 6H that was $300, right? That's just simple math.
That's the math.
Anyone who doesn't understand that math is just, so I liked playing the Con 6H, but I needed to get something better. And so I got the Edwards, and I stopped playing the Con, basically, almost exclusively. And, just keep with the small bore train, because I basically didn't play it again till late college. I played the Edwards for a long time, and honestly, I don't think it was very well matched for me ever. I think it was a much better fit for you. Surprised the custom trombone that I got set up with fits the person who didn't go get it custom. I would almost argue after having that experience, not saying that it was never a bad instrument, but I think maybe I was too young to get a custom instrument. Maybe that was not the best use of money.
Right, like for your personal journey, maybe there was more exploring of yourself and your own playing tendencies,
right,
than we had thought previously. But I mean, at the end of the day, I guess you already had that really wonderful Con, but it's not like the Edwards was going to make you any worse. Like,
right.
We're not saying don't go get a really nice horn for yourself because you deserve it. Go ahead and do that.
And but I think at the end,
as far as
sorry, go ahead.
Keep going. You go.
At the end of the day, I think because I thought it was such a good horn, I'm not saying it wasn't a good horn, but because I had these preconceived notions in my head, I was like, yes, I'm going to practice now because this horn is so good. And I probably ultimately practiced more because I thought this horn was better, which ultimately is more important than what horn you play, is practicing and trying to get better.
There's something to be said about that, right? And it's like whether it's placebo or not doesn't necessarily matter in this specific case, because ultimately it planted a seed of a long-term musical exploration and growth.
Right.
Whether or not the horn made you sound like $1 million instantly or not, at this point in the narrative, doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So I would say it was a net positive, and you were a better person for having explored that option and made that purchase.
And I think, I remember, some of my memories of like doing that like consultation where I was getting set up for that horn. I remember I played like the melody to Summertime.
Yeah,
and like that's how I tested the horn, and then
that's a great tester.
And then Mike Klobes, who is the guy who's helping me out at Edwards, he was like, now play it up the octave. I never played up the octave, and I didn't really know what I was doing, and so I just like played it up the octave, kind of, and like never didn't sound good, and it's just like, yeah, let's try a different bell, and it's just like. But yeah, I mean, they're great horns. No, the point of this is definitely not to, say it's not a great horn.
Oh, they're amazing horns. I mean, both of them are amazing horns. Your Con's an amazing horn. Edwards is great.
Right. It's just ultimately having the right tool for the job, but you don't know what job you're going to do. It can get specific if you let it, and I think the best thing that you can do is try to play a horn and make it work for whatever you are doing,
Yep.
Instead of, thinking that, I need to it's like, and we all get in those zones. I definitely still get in those zones of, just like the brass quintet thing. I was like, I don't have a tuba for brass quintet. But if someone's going to hire me and I want to get hired again, I should probably try to figure it out.
Right. Like there's going to be a point where, horn or not, you're going to be sitting in that chair and you're going to need to make the music happen. And even if you don't have the perfect tool for the job, my inclination is to think that any of us would do what we need to do to make that music happen.
Right.
And whether or not you need a piece of equipment that will maybe lend itself more to that style of music or make the job easier. Depending on the frequency at which you do that type of music, that's up to you.
Right.
Whether you need to make that really, really specific gear-based decision. But 90% of us, or the vast majority of us that are existing in a musical space, are doing a vast array of many different things, to the point where, like, I don't think that I personally need to specialize in some sort of super specific horn that does one job really, really well. For me, yeah, there might come a time where it's like, sorry, dude, like all I play is, alto trombone. It's probably not going to happen to me personally, but you might find yourself in that position, or like, wow, all I do is play F tuba in every single musical engagement. What would that be? Is there like a job where someone would only play F tuba for like their whole gig?
Yeah, if you're in a touring brass quintet, that's an option. It's not necessarily what everybody does.
I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, I mean, if you're playing an orchestra, it's mostly contrabass, either C or B flat. Probably C in the United States. And then you'll play some F. Brass quintet is just a really complicated thing, but if you're in like a touring brass quintet, you're not bringing two tubas.
You're bringing your bass trombone.
Yeah, there you go. But you're bringing whatever tuba makes the most sense, and that kind of depends on what you're doing. If you're like Canadian brass is never used, to my knowledge. I'm sure someone can sharpshoot me. I've never seen an image with Charles Zellenbach playing an F tuba. I've never seen it. I'm sure there's some recording somewhere that someone can say, well, actually, too.
Right.
But I've never seen it, and I'm sure it's happened. I guess I assume it's happened, but everything that I've ever seen, he's playing C tuba. And, with that, and since they have, they either arrange their stuff themselves or pay someone to arrange things, but it's generally speaking for them specifically. When you know what tools people are going to be using, you can write for the tool.
Yeah.
The American brass quintet doesn't even have tuba.
Right.
And there are several pieces that were written for them. And it's all bass trombone. So would you be surprised that, your largest tuba is maybe not the best choice?
Right. It might not be super appropriate.
And then, there's a whole slew of like French repertoire, which probably when it was written, was not written with kind of the modern tuba in mind. There's some
modern day tuba.
Yeah. So there's some really high stuff in like some Bozza brass quintet music where you have like A's above the staff and things like that, and it's just like, yes, you can do that on a C tuba, on a B flat tuba. I mean, I can do it. I'd rather not in a high pressure situation.
Right.
I'd like to keep my batting average as high as possible. So with that kind of in mind, I think mostly more modern brass quintet situations are kind of, using more bass tubas being F or E flat, like the Dallas brass. Paul plays E flat. He did play F for a little while. But yeah, I think that he pretty much exclusive. Like I've only seen him with E flat since then. I haven't talked to him in a few years, but I think he uses E flat exclusively now. But yeah, that's and that kind of makes potentially even more sense. Not to go off on this tangent of brass quintet or just tuba.
That's fine. I think this is what we were looking for.
Right. So it's just, especially with that sort of thing, you think about it with tuba. If you could be playing really low stuff on tuba or really high stuff on tuba, you want something in the middle, theoretically.
Right.
And kind of for me, I would probably either want maybe even the same E flat that Paul plays, or I'd like to play like an F that is kind of modeled after that size, and that. I like to say, with this, with like a 2250 or something, it's like it's a C tuba pitched in F, like it's a very large F tuba, but it feels a little bit more substantial than that. But since the partials are closer together, some of the high stuff works out pretty. Your batting average might be a little bit higher.
Right.
But it's also important to always remember that playing a higher key of tuba or any instrument doesn't just automatically unlock range.
It doesn't?
It does not. So
Bummer.
yeah, it is a bummer. So, with any of the tubas, and that's the thing too, it's like ultimately there's not really one tool for a job like that. And it's the same thing. Like I played a lot of, I think the trombone kind of equivalent to something like that is playing like musicals.
Yes.
Like we've all
Absolutely.
played a musical, maybe not all of us, but I'm sure you, Connor, have played a musical where there's a low E flat or there's a low D or there's something like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like, cool, I have to at least play a large bore. And then it's like there's also a bunch of high stuff, and the sound, more importantly, that you're after is more that sort of character.
Yep.
And you might be in a really small pit. 2 trombones might not be an option, or there might be really quick changes in style between, there might be a segue from the closing thing to the bows or whatever, the case may be. Ultimately, you have to bring the trombone or the instrument or whatever that can do everything kind of well.
Yep.
And so, that's why,
That's
like,
a tricky one.
if I were choosing, if all I did was play musicals, I'd probably have a slew of trombones of different sizes that all have F attachments.
Yes.
That's where your King
what you
3B
mean.
is valuable. Your 3BF, your Bach 36 with a valve, or those sorts of horns become more interesting. Yeah, I have an answer potentially. I might.
What is the model name, or what do we call a Bach 36 with a valve? Is it like a 36? Is it 36F? Is that just what it's, or is there like a special word for it?
So the nomenclature that Bach uses, B means that there is a valve.
B,
or at least that means that there is a conventional rotor valve, I should say, with a closed wrap. So a 36B is a Bach 36, a 525 with an 8-inch bell with a closed wrap F attachment. Same thing with a 40,
interesting horn.
with a 42B. That you don't have a 42B because it's a Thayer valve, so they use a T.
Oh,
so it's a 42T. And then the Thayer only comes in open wrap, but with the B variant, it could be open wrap, it could be closed wrap. So if it's open wrap, it's going to be BO. So a 36BO is going to be a 36 with an open wrap. And then I think A is what they use for Hagman. At some point it's just like, we'll just look at it,
Right.
I've thought about doing a whole video that probably no one is really interested in, or maybe not no one, maybe you're interested. But
I think it's just me.
but of all of the different, letters and variants of Bach trombones, because I think people don't know what they're buying. And some of it is really, really tricky and not found on any website or very few websites. Like I kind of got obsessed with figuring out what the nomenclature for my 36 is. Because as you know, and as some viewers may know, it's a sterling silver bell.
Right.
But the S means silver plated. It's not silver plated. It is silver. It is sterling silver through and through.
Silver all the way through it. Wow.
So I went on this whole long thing, and if you go on Bach's website, as far as I could find, sterling silver or sterling silver plus bells do not exist on their website. Like, there's not one mention that I can find of it. I found 2 mentions on the internet of real, either, well, I guess there are more mentions on forums and things, but the 2 websites that I found, Hickey's mentioned that there was a sterling silver plus option, but I don't believe they had a letter or any sort of naming scheme associated with it. And then Adams, I think that they're based in Switzerland. Don't quote me. I believe that they're also an importer into Europe of Bach trombones.
Huh.
And so on their website, I was able to find a model number of an instrument that had a sterling silver bell, and on there I found out that said R.
R?
So to my best knowledge, my Bach 36 is an
36?
an LT because it's a lightweight slide.
Oh, right.
And that comes first. So LT 36R.
That is so confusing.
Yeah, it literally could not be more confusing, I don't think.
I feel like there are more appropriate uses for the word R,
Like rose brass or
in,
something.
or just like standard rotor, like the ones that like closed wrap rotor. Like, why
Right.
would we not just do that? I guess that could just be F,
Well, it's a B.
but it's not. It's B.
Right.
It's the letter B. The B is silent in the word rotor. Rotor.
There you go.
There you go.
So yeah, it's very confusing. But yeah, I've thought about doing like a whole deep dive. One of the reasons why I didn't want to do a deep dive of that is because I was a little bit afraid that I'd be spreading misinformation, even though I've done some research. Because at the end of the day, it's like not on Bach's website. Like it's not like
Right.
it's not something I can like look at and see very clearly that 100% this is what this means.
Here's a thought. Is there like an email address or a phone number
Yeah,
that we could call?
If I were to do that video and if I were to do it, with my highest journalistic standards, I would probably, phone a friend, phone someone at Bach and see what I can find out.
Yes, I think you should present the evidence that you have given us now and like the rabbit hole that you've gone through.
Right.
And then maybe cross-reference that with the final vetting process of consulting the professional, just to see maybe not to be like a litmus test, but just to it would be a cool narrative to see like how reliable trombone's really specific gear of information is on the internet. Like we keep finding out like, this the information may not be on a lot of manufacturers' websites, but Hickey's is right all the time. Like
Right.
That's worth knowing if we end up giving evidence and an argument to like credibility to where there might be already a definitive source that we don't even know about.
Right, and then there are all these other. We got a nice cat meow on the mic, hot mic. But one of the things that gets tricky too, especially with Bach's, is that a lot of people have customized things. So
Right.
like with my Bach bass trombone, it says Bach 50B, which means it has one valve. My bass trombone does not have one valve. The second valve was added at one point. So, you get into situations like that where, what are you supposed to do with that information? You know what I mean?
Right.
So yeah, it's just kind of tricky. And then, there are plenty of instruments that have had extra valves or, different valves put on them at some point. And then they have, their artisan line now. It's like, that's confusing and kind of just separate.
Right. That's a whole other.
And then there are
can of worms.
they've also been a company for 100+ years.
Right.
So it's like certain things have changed. And like one of the things that I don't see as being perfectly standard is what the M means.
This is a Bach thing?
Yeah. So like with the Bach 16 LT16M, the Bill Watrous model.
Yes.
What the difference between that and an LT16, to my knowledge, is that it has a different neck pipe, but also it has a different bore. It's a straight bore instead of a dual bore.
Oh.
But I think what usually the M refers to is just the neck pipe.
Interesting.
So like if you see that on like a 42, it's like 42 GM or something like that. I think that means that it has a more open, probably more Bach 50 like neck pipe, but again, don't quote me on that.
So maybe, is it possible that so you said the Bill Watrous M is neck pipe and it's straight?
It's a straight
bore. As opposed to being dual bore? Maybe you just had the name Bill Watrous on it, like maybe the M.
But the horn doesn't say Bill Watrous on it at all. That's just like, that's what it is.
Oh.
And it's tricky too, because then, like, let's say you were selling some custom horn and you put a lightweight regular 16 slide that's like whatever the dual bore, I believe, for that is.
Mm-hmm.
Does that change what you call it? Because
I think the newer models of the 16M do say Bill Watrous on them. If it is like,
they might.
Like, I think that's like my one Bill Watrous story was him saying they should have put the name bigger on it, but I can't remember if he was talking about the word Bach or if it was his signature or something that was on it.
We're gonna go.
It might have just
we're gonna go in
been-
horn guys and see if we can pull up a picture. Let's see. They don't really. Oh wait, maybe here. Yeah, this looks like a brand new one. No, it just says Model 16M. And that's the other thing too. There's no mention of the LT on the bell section because that shouldn't theoretically have anything to do with the bell section. That's just the slide. So yeah, just, it's a confusing thing. And ultimately, does the horn sound good? Does it not sound good? Is it easy for you to play? None of this really matters.
Right, but it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I find really interesting because especially because things have changed over the years. There are a lot of discontinued models. Like one of the ones that I've always wanted, like there's never been a real reason for me to get this necessarily, is a Bach 45.
Oh, I think I've seen that before. What's the specs on a 45?
So the 45, I believe, is just the same thing as the 50, but with a 9-inch bell instead of a 9.5 or larger bell.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's just that. In my head, that would be just like a really cool, like single valve bass trombone to have. Do I need a single valve bass trombone? I do not.
Right.
Do I want one anyway? Sure. It's definitely very low on the priority list of things to have.
And just so I'm keeping my ducks in a row, and I think you said this already, if it were you said 47 was the number, or 45.
45.
And if it was a single valve bass trombone with a 9-inch bell, not that part's important, it would be a 45B.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. So single valve, and also if it's just the B and no BO, if it's just the B, then
closed wrap.
It's closed wrap.
Right. Makes all the sense in the world.
And then the other thing too, it's like when you see like use instrument postings, you see this stuff incorrect all the time, but it's just like, well, what's in the picture? It's
right. You just got to go look.
It's like, oh, it says B, but it's open wrapped. Is it actually open wrapped? It's like, there are pictures. Probably. I guess these could be fake pictures, but probably not. But yeah, the number generally I would say that's kind of like the starting point of what the trombone is. Like if
that'll tell you a lot of information.
Right. So like the current models, to the best of my knowledge, without including the artisan ones, we have the 12 is the smallest. It's like a 500 bore. Then we have a few variants of the 16, and then the 36, and there's also a 34 that used to exist with a 522 bore size. And
That's an odd number.
522 used to be a number that, like, I don't think that to my knowledge, there aren't any modern horns that have a 522 bore, but that's like a thing that multiple, like Kahn was doing it. Maybe it was just those two, but I know that there at least a few companies had 522 bores, and I think that kind of predated 525. And I don't know if that's especially with those companies, I wouldn't assume it's a conversion from millimeters, but maybe that's just the parts that they got and they were that size or whatever. Right. But yeah, so modern box numbers 12, 16, 36, 42, 50. Those 5, to my knowledge, are the only ones that still exist. But there used to be
go
ahead.
What about, is there an alto trombone that Bach
sorry,
sells?
39. Yeah. My fault.
39, that's what it is. Yeah, that's okay.
Forgot about that one. I do know that it exists, but
yeah.
That's not a horn you see very often. I don't know that I've seen one in person. I know that they exist.
I've seen one before. I think Ryan Christensen plays on one.
Nope. Well, he's not last I checked. He plays on a Kahn 36H.
Oh, that's what
with
it
the
is.
valve, right? That's the one you've seen.
I think so. Yeah.
So yeah,
nice.
and Kahn. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we could go into, and I don't know all of their things off the top of my head because they have some really confusing ones. You definitely got me on a rabbit hole topic that like I think about.
That's all right.
It's just like Zach can't sleep. It's just like, what's he thinking about? It's like that meme. It's like he's probably thinking about other girls, and it's like no, he's thinking about all the like.
You're thinking about 36R.
Right, and just like, does this exist? Like, is this a lie? Because Yeah, but anyway, the con ones I don't know quite as well because they have like HK and they're different valves and they have some really interesting horns that no one seems to really play that much, or at least don't see them. Like they have some horns that question what your definition of a bass trombone or a tenor trombone is.
Interesting.
That's that the alto trombone with a B flat attachment. Yeah, I think it's talking about the 36H there in the comments.
Right.
But
that makes sense. I didn't even think about the implications of the valve on an alto trombone that's in E flat. So then you're just playing, when you have the valve depressed, you're essentially just playing a Bach 36 or
con.
Wait,
con
no.
8. Well, if it's
wait, so that would be a B flat. What's the bore size of the 36H?
That I don't know off the top of my head. I want to say 491, or maybe it's bigger.
Okay, so
maybe it's bigger. Let me. I don't want to spread misinformation. I'll delete this afterwards. Actually, I won't. I never go back and edit. I definitely should. It just yeah. But let's pull up the exact bore size.
Because then the question is, when you have it pressed down, what con trombone are you technically playing?
Dual bore 491 500.
Okay.
So that's an interesting question, and I don't think that we've ever talked about this. It's fun finding things that we don't know trombone or music wise about each other. Did you know that I played a 36H for a little while?
No.
So because while I was an undergraduate at the University of North Texas, before you got there as a graduate student, one summer, I don't remember which summer, I want to say it was in between junior and senior year, but maybe it was in between sophomore and junior year, or maybe it was, I don't remember exactly the timing of it, but UNT has, I think, 2 of those cons, and they're not usually, I mean, I would say those probably are not that commonly used in general, because either you don't need an alto or you own an alto that you don't need. That's mostly what alto especially for a collegiate student. If you're playing principal trombone in a symphony orchestra, you still don't technically need one, but you probably have a conductor that's breathing down your neck to play one.
Right.
Like if your goal in life is to be a principal trombonist in a major symphony orchestra, you should you should own an alto trombone.
Sure.
If you're playing second trombone and are never going to fill in for the principal trombone when you're playing Schumann or whatever, you don't need it. You really don't need it at the end of the day. There's nothing that, technically speaking, there's not a note that the alto trombone can play that the tenor trombone can't. But to go back to your previous kind of question of what trombone you're playing, it's kind of a matter of perspective at some level.
Uh-huh.
Because it's like kind of goes back to like how brass instruments work.
Mm-hmm.
Do we've all seen those sorts of product pages where it's the B flat / F trombone. Do you really think that you're playing an F trombone at some point when you depress that valve? Do you think about it that way? I'm not saying what it is or what it isn't. Do you in your head, now I'm on F trombone? Right.
I mean, no one's thinking. I mean, maybe someone is. I'm not thinking about it in that sort of way.
We got Brady here. That's good.
Hey, what's up, Brady?
We miss. Oh, that's the wrong comment. Sorry.
That's all right. We like to see that too.
Yeah, we like to. We're still talking about the alto trombone, the B flat attachment.
We are.
So to me, it's kind of a matter of vantage point. It's a matter of somewhat opinion. But yes, technically speaking, it's this. Once you press that valve down, it's the same length as a tenor trombone.
Right.
And I think some people do use it that way.
And I think I imagine, like, I'm just thinking about this because it's difficult to think about, I'm playing the F trombone. But when you do depress the valve on an E flat alto trombone going into B flat, that's a more familiar headspace to work with, wherein there's going to be trombone players that do think, I'm playing a trombone in E flat, and there are certain things that you do in a trombone in E flat that you think about because you're playing the whole range of the instrument in E flat.
Right.
And whoever's doing that, I imagine they also have the same transferable skills in B flat. They can probably play the whole range of the horn in B flat. So that's like my argument
but
is
how many positions do you have then?
How many positions do you have when you have the E flat horn that you have depressed into the B flat side of things? That's a good question. Does it work the same way that when you go down to F, the slide positions are less?
Fewer.
Or fewer? All right, buddy.
No, to be honest, I've just, one of my roommates in college for years tried to get me to learn the difference between less and fewer. And it took me a long time, and I think I'm kind of there. So I'm very proud of my... there are fewer slide positions, yes, and on alto trombone, depending on what alto you have, there's always talk of, without the valve, it's like, is there a true seventh position? Like the alto trombone that I have, I would argue there's not a seventh position. Do I need that very often? No, but it's not really, it's like, seventh position on a regular trombone, yeah, it's all the way out there, but with this trombone, it's like really all the way out there.
I see.
And so.
Oh, right, because your slide length is shorter. Doy.
Right, but theoretically, it could still be in proportion in a way where you still have the full seven positions. But most alto trombones, you don't really get that seventh position.
Right.
Which
it's
is
not
why.
Function.
Which is why
okay.
like with and Brady, I will answer your question in a second, but I just want to finish this. This conversation just real quick. That's why, some trombonists use, it's not always a B-flat attachment. Sometimes it's what people call a trill valve, sometimes being a half step, sometimes being a whole step, sometimes being convertible.
Right.
And, one of my teachers, Dr. Brett Schuster, he plays a Yamaha, and I believe that's the one where it's like it's either a whole step or a half step. And I remember one time saying something to him, just, probably just when I was like 17, just be like, oh, you need a trill valve for that? Like, that's silly. Can't you just do lip trills? I'm sure I said something dumb like that. And he's like, well, no, I use it so that I can get to a real seventh position. And it's like, oh, that makes sense. Because you just need a little bit more tubing. And so he uses it in that sort of way. So yeah, again, it's kind of all a matter of vantage point.
So to recap it for me, just as it makes sense in my head, for the question that I was asking of, does it become a B-flat trombone? It does not. And the argument being that while the tubing length is the same as a B-flat trombone, more of that tubing is now allocated to behind the rotor as opposed to the slide, because the slide length is going to remain constant whether you are in E-flat or B-flat. Am I correct?
It's hard to say that you're correct with that statement. So I think ultimately, and I always talk to, like, especially this comes up more with tuba than trombone, really, because I feel like more trombonists in a lot of ways have a better functional understanding of how brass instruments work just based off the instrument. I think the thing with tubas that sometimes we just don't fully understand what's happening, because it's like, well, I press this valve and this note comes out. Well, what's happening? You don't see the change in tubing really as well. So let's dial it all the way back, and this is how I always explain it to my students, and not that I think you get it, but this is the way.
Explain it to me like a student, because I want to hear it like a student.
This is the way that I interpret the data, is that, let's go back to valves don't exist. The slide does come along a little bit earlier than valves, but let's say that all we have, let's just go back to like natural horn, like all we can do is play the overtone series, right?
Right.
What did they do when Beethoven modulated and we went from E to A or whatever? What did they do? Do you know?
We put it in a different crook?
Right. They put in a different crook. So it was like, oh, I can't use my B-flat horn, now I have to use my A horn or whatever. We had to change, physically alter the instrument. You had to take out, for those who don't know what a crook is, it's essentially just a slide. So you had to pull a crook out, put a different crook in, which changed the length of the instrument, which then gives you a new overtone series. So thinking about all the notes you can play in first position on a trombone, or all the instruments, or all the notes that you can play without pressing any valves on tuba. That's all they had. But they had to play in different keys to some extent. That's why they mostly played fifths and fourths and they played what was available to them. And yes, you could manipulate it, and that's why hand horn is a thing. That's kind of a separate discussion. But thinking about it that way is you had to change the instrument to a different key. to me, that's what we do with the slide. That's what we do with the valves. So I explain it on tuba. It's like, here, we'll go with B flat for, I think it'll be easiest for everybody. Here's my B flat tuba. I've got my keyboard on. I can play. We'll go with a piano sound. Except we're out of tune. It's like we have all those notes that are open, and then that's
B flat
open
tuba.
Now here's my A tuba. It's like then we have that, and then we have my A flat tuba, G tuba, G, and that's the same thing with trombone: B flat trombone, A flat trombone, G flat trombone, F trombone, E flat, D. All of those sort of iterations as well. So what I would argue is that each instrument is it's all those instruments wrapped in one.
Right. It's like a modular package of crooks. It is a set of transpositions of horn.
Because especially with a valve, that's what we're doing, right? It's just like, let me add, I need 6% more tubing of the whole to go down a half step. On trombone, we go from here to here. On tuba, we go from here to here. It's like that. That's how we get that extra tubing.
I understand.
So my argument to how I like to answer your question, which ultimately doesn't really matter. It matters that you play the right notes and that it sounds good. That's all that really matters at the end of the day. But what I would say is that, yes, it is, when we do this, now it is a B-flat trombone from the E-flat alto, but also we have our E-flat alto, we have our D alto, our D-flat alto, our C alto. But we don't think about it that way, nor is that really helpful.
Right.
But, someone who kind of turned me on to this line of thinking was Reggie Chapman, who, if anybody in the chat doesn't know Reggie Chapman, stop the stream right now. Actually, please don't. But go look at Reggie Chapman and look at the band that I think he's still in. I'm not really sure the details of that. Haven't talked to him in a little bit about it. But No BS Brass, and look up the song Brass Scene Kids, where he does all these crazy valve things, and he kind of turned me on to this line of thinking, with the bass trombone being all these different keys of instrument with each of these valves, because so much of bass trombone technique and bass trombone study has basically been taught by tenor trombonists.
Right.
And there's a lot of underutilization of especially the independent bass trombone, because dependent came first for whatever reason, as far as I know. Again, sorry if I'm inaccurate. That's the story I've always heard. I haven't read about it in some textbook that is ironclad. But yeah, so essentially that's another line of thinking. And again, it's not always helpful to think about it that way, but it's essentially how all this works. So I guess my answer would be is that yes, this does turn it into B flat from the E flat. That being said, that's not really helpful to think about it that way.
Right. I get you now.
Right, and it also doesn't necessarily feel or seem that way sometimes too.
Right.
There are definitely people who play that Con 36H, and whether it's their normal way of doing it or their panic solution, they will.
Right. They'll put that bad boy down and just like, oh, we got a ride. Manual. No. Yeah.
Right. So I hope Brady's still here. I know I said I'd answer his question, and I really took a long time to get there. But either he can come back here and listen to our answer, or maybe hopefully he's still here. So Brady says, hey, I have a question. I was told by a lesson teacher that he noticed it, and now I noticed it, that my chin moves up and down while articulating, and he said it was a bad habit. Like my chin kind of moving like I'm chewing gum. So Brady's still here. That's good news.
Awesome.
It's definitely like a 10, 15 minute time of putting. We do try to answer the questions, but sometimes I feel like we were on to something.
We had a whole thing there. It was worth finishing that.
We had to get through it. So yes.
Now we will honor this question, give it the same space.
So teaching is a complicated thing. I want to first preface that, and I have my philosophies on teaching. Others have different philosophies on teaching. Connor and I agree a lot. We don't agree on everything, and nor should we. That's not. Neither of us would get better as teachers or players if that was the, if that was how it goes. So so basically my response to that is, I've noticed that sort of thing on students before. Is it the optimal way to play the tuba or to play a brass instrument? I'd probably argue no. That being said, form follows function, and I try to fix things like that by not talking about it. And I know at this point, that ship has sailed, because
right, cat's out of the bag.
Right. It's like, how do when someone says, don't think about pink elephants, what are you thinking about? Pink elephants. It's just once that thought is incepted, there's kind of no going back from it. So I guess my way of answering that is, if I see a student doing that, that's not probably the way that I would recommend that someone play. That's generally not going to be helpful, because if you think about it, that's more motion that has to happen so that you can articulate, and it's probably going to make things harder than more helpful.
Right.
But there are kind of other ways. I always go back. To me, this is the simplest example of how I try to teach things. I think we're all pretty used to the idea that breathing through our nose is generally considered to be incorrect, right? We should be breathing through our mouth. We can get more air through that way, and we're not going to be probably obstructed if we have allergies or something. I think we all have been told, breathe. Sometimes you'll hear don't breathe through your nose. Sometimes you'll hear breathe through your mouth. If I'm on my P's and Q's, now I'm going to say a negative, but I try always to say that say a positive thing instead of a negative thing. And that's not to say that, I'm showering my students with all these, compliments and things. That's not helpful either. But, in the case of breathe through your mouth and not through your nose, I would choose to say, or tell a student, breathe through your mouth. Make sure you're always breathing through your mouth, because then you hear that and all you think about is breathing through your mouth. Instead of when we say, don't breathe through your nose, what are you thinking about? You're thinking about, oh, I'm breathing through my nose, I got to stop that. But all you're thinking about is breathing through your nose, and it's so much harder to stop.
Yes.
It's not impossible, but it's just the way our brains work. Negative, don't do this is generally not as helpful. And you can apply that to so many different, ways of life. That applies to training a dog. That applies to probably parenting a child, although I don't have personal experience. Those sorts of things. It is better to have positive. Do this thing. Let's replace that bad habit with a good one. But I'm not going to talk about that bad habit.
Right.
So Brady said.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think you're getting in the right direction. And what I would add on to that is that there is something that we do with that in education.
Yeah, you're probably a little bit more up on how the brain works than I am. I'm more talking about experience, but you probably read more books.
I mean, it's definitely it's a confirmed thing that it's way easier to get someone to add a behavior into their environment or to influence someone than to say to stop doing something. So if you've got a 5-year-old that is leaning back in their chair, and I just
one thing, you're saying a 5-year-old. Our brains are all the same. Theirs are less developed than probably most people watching this stream, but it's like we're all kind of the same at the end of the day. But
and this is in that the reason I use an example of a 5-year-old is because they're operating in a concrete operational stage, which while we have higher levels of thinking, more abstract thought as adults and adolescents, this still applies across the board. And it's a very simple thing of, if I tell the kid, don't lean back in your chair, they're gonna want to lean back in their chair. But if I say the instruction, feet on the floor or show me flat feet, then that gives them something that they can do. It's more of an incentive, and that will work and be way more effective than say, hey, stop doing that. Right. It's just it's a simple brain thing. But as far as like it gets more sophisticated when we're talking about really, really nuanced things in someone's brass playing. But I think you're correct, and I will back you up on that, of like trying to find something to focus on that is the solution, as opposed to trying to rip the problem out of your playing.
It's really hard to go with that sort of route in anything that you do. It's like let's say you're trying to drink less coffee. You're trying to have less caffeine. Just ripping it away is hard. Replacing it with a fizzy beverage or something like that, that's a lot easier. That's just, again, it's just how all of our brains work.
Right.
It's replace it with whatever you're considering to be a positive behavior.
But we should also mention, this might be the way that it was brought up in the private lesson. It could have been just like maybe you should try X, Y, or Z with your sound concept. Go for a really smooth, consistent sound when you're articulating, because I noticed X, Y, or Z. I mean, it's really hard as a teacher to try to insert that new desired positive behavior without recognizing, or at least shedding light into, the behavior that you were trying to eliminate, especially in an environment where the student and teacher are both very like objectively being watching and analyzing the playing, and that's the whole reason why you're there in the private lesson in the first place.
Right. And what I would say, the teachers that I've had, I've had a lot of teachers, a lot of really good teachers, a lot of great teachers. The ones that I would consider to the level of masterful teachers is those are the teachers that are playing chess, not checkers, or playing, or maybe more accurately playing 3D chess. If you're familiar with that, that line of thinking is that it's, they're playing. They're not necessarily telling you exactly what they're thinking, which is hard to do, because I notice things in my students all the time. It's like, this note's out of tune, this rhythm is wrong, it's like, it's so easy to come up with a laundry list. And so, Brady's asking, do you have any tips that might help? I know it's hard because of you not seeing me. One, Brady, it might be interesting to, if you wanted to submit for the Low Brass U Studio Class feature, I think it's in the description. If not, I'm really sorry. But it should be in the description, that the Google Doc form to fill out and upload a video, which would help us see you. But, I think that the tip that I would kind of give, in the way that I would, if I'm removing, you're seeing the teacher behind the curtain sort of thing, I would be thinking about making things really easy and staying as relaxed as possible. And one of the things that one of my teachers, Rex Martin, would always tell me is that you don't need any of the physical strength that you have to play a brass instrument. We sometimes get in our heads that this is this really muscular feat, and he would say things like, you had enough strength to play this instrument when you were 4. Just kind of thinking at it like, we think about, well, you have to develop these muscles, these corners, firm corners, and all these sorts of things.
Right.
And ultimately, there's some truth to that sort of stuff in it. And I think I always like to preface a lot of my teaching stuff with, I think brass teaching is a pseudoscience. Or I guess that's a little bit unfair, because that implies that anything with the brain is a soft science and not a hard science, which is definitely a discussion that we're not necessarily getting into. But I guess my point is, I say things to my students that are factually incorrect, and I know that they're factually incorrect. But I say them so that they get the right thing to happen.
Wait, what's the example of that?
An example of that I always give, and this is something that I think in my head, or I guess factually incorrect is not necessarily the case with this, but it doesn't make sense, I'll put it that way, is a lot of times we rush fast rhythms, we rush our 16th notes, things like that, right? With faster notes, I always think about playing it as slow as possible in time.
Right.
That doesn't make sense. It's either in time or it's not.
I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that's a great way to teach that.
But you can see how that's like, that doesn't really, that's not really a scientific or mathematical way of approaching it. You know what I mean?
Here's why I think that's a good teaching tool. Playing music as slowly as you can while still being in time. I don't think the problem is that you're not hiding anything from the student. I think that you're being very, very transparent about what the learning target is for that exact moment, which is stop rushing. But
also, go back to the previous point. Did I say the word rushing? I mean, I know you.
No, you didn't.
That's the point of, to me, that's
right,
the
exactly.
chess not checkers moment.
There's certain information that, like, while still being completely transparent about, hey, here is our learning goal, there's some details and semantics and maybe like stuff that you've done lots of studying on because you're a master of your craft and you've done this in graduate school and orchestras and yada yada. We don't need all of that right now.
Right.
But you can distill that, and I think that's that good versus great thing of, like, you're still talking about the same exact concept and you're giving the clearest musical idea to the student in the room that maybe your lessons with Rex Martin, he might have explained it in more, like sophisticated or complicated or academic terms because you are both able to communicate in that sort of language. But as far as like the music that everyone's hearing in their head and the goal that we all want, that's really very similar. And and I think you're using your words in a very powerful way and in a very intentional way. And
I'm definitely not going to sit here and say I am a masterful teacher, but boy, am I trying to be.
Sure.
That's definitely my goal is to be a masterful teacher. And some days I am, probably some days I'm not. But those are the sorts of things. Kind of going back to Brady's thing. I'm just throwing some hellos on there while we're talking.
Sure.
But yeah, one of the things that I kind of think about or would have a student do is just trying to get it to be, again, I would see that problem. I don't want to say it's a problem because but I did.
Right. It's not a problem. It's just something.
It's a thing that's happening that probably is not the most efficient thing. And I think
let's say for the context of what it sounds like to me, we might be corrected by Brady and criticism for wrong. It sounds like it wasn't getting in the way. It was just something that we noticed in the music.
And that's a thing. That's another thing to think about. Was this a visual notice or was this a articulation sounds kind of weird? Why is it weird?
Right.
And that's a thing to again, not to kind of turn it back on me and things, but according to textbooks, I don't play with a correct embouchure. I don't. I never have. But if you're looking for it, it's a real big problem. I've had teachers that I took one-off lessons with, and who got out the art of brass playing, flipped around and showed me what this should look like. What the CSO player, Chicago Symphony players, looked like in the '80s or whenever those pictures were taken, and yeah, it's helpful information. And I've had people say that you need to fix this now, and I quote unquote never fixed it. Is it the most efficient? Maybe, maybe not. People pay me to play sometimes. It's like it's worked. It's worked okay. People pay me to teach them. Do I try to get students to play the way I play? No. I'm definitely not going to try to create that as being like this is the way you should do it. But that's the sort of thing that I think is important for and ultimately, becoming a better student at the end of the day has to do with you accepting the good things from your teacher. And I'm not trying to say that what your teacher said is bad or anything, but you have to figure out how to interpret the data. That's a thing that I think about, because I've had some teachers that are really good, but have said some things where if I just went down a rabbit hole with it, I'd probably not come out a better player on the other side. And I think that the older you get, or not, maybe that older is a bad word, but the more experience you get with taking lessons and studying from various people, you learn things that maybe that don't work for you. And also another thing that's very important is everybody's brain is different. There different styles of learning, and even that's too simplified. Saying that you're either an audio, visual, or kinesthetic learner. It's like that's too simple. It's not. That's a good way to kind of get an idea for what's going on, but it's more complicated than that. Yeah, and Zach's saying, just don't sound bad. And ultimately, that's kind of how, again, I would say just sound good, but, just the positive thing. But that's ultimately, at the end of the day, when you see Joe Leslie play with the New York Philharmonic, do you know what his embouchure looks like when you're in the back row? You just know that it sounds really good.
Right.
You know? So, and Brady is saying, I would say it was more of a sight thing, but when he tried to fix the problem, it didn't help my playing. And while I would say chewing really only hampered my speed of your playing, which, yeah, and that's kind of going back to the thing, is it optimal? I think it's pretty clear that it's not optimal. I think we can just like take a step back and think about it. And if this is moving every single note, as you go faster, you know, you can only move so quickly. It's just, you know,
right.
Your jaw's
it's going to be
magic.
diminishing returns.
Right. So, again, I do think that it's the sort of thing, like, you know, Brady, you're a regular viewer. I know that you're here. I don't know everything about you. If your goal is to, you know, play in a symphony orchestra where you have to play all these fast excerpts or whatever, you know, or like really make a go of it, it's something that maybe we would want to try to massage out eventually. But just focusing on it is, again, from my teaching style, and, you know, maybe that's why I have some students who do really well and some that don't do as well. Maybe my teaching style would work great for you, Brady. Maybe it wouldn't. You know, the fit with your teacher is really important, and how your brain works. And that's going back to how your brain works. To me, that's like the first year of teaching a student, is figuring out how, like, that's my goal, is I want to figure out how your brain works. And again, I'm not a masterful, you know, psychologist. Like, I'm not going to totally figure it out. But that's kind of my, you know. But yeah, I think that you have the right idea that totally worrying about it is not necessarily the thing that's going to help you, because you can, you know, there's a phrase of paralysis by analysis.
There you go.
And there is a sort of scenario that can happen, you know, where playing becomes harder because you're thinking about certain things. And I wish I had better analogies for this, but I always go back to sports analogies. I know a lot of people don't watch sports. But I guess a better way to think of it is anybody who does something physically really well, do they think about how they do something? The sports analogies, it's the easiest, so I'm going to use that. You know, thinking about in your own mind, choose your favorite athlete of whatever sport. You know, like thinking about Serena Williams, one of the greatest tennis players ever. Do you really think that Serena Williams, when she's serving, is thinking about how her shoulder is rotating to hit the tennis ball?
Mm-hmm.
I think she's trying to hit the ball hard and make it where the other person can't hit it.
Right.
That's how our brains do the best, with clear, concise, simple commands, you know, from our brain to our body. And that's the sort of thing, you know, think about a basketball player, like Steph Curry is always my example. He's very good at shooting long-range three-pointers. Do we think that what he's doing is, okay, you know, I bend my wrist this way, left hand on the side of the ball, kind of guiding it, you know, follow through, I jump with my knees, you know, bend my knees, jump up? No, I'd be very surprised if he was.
Right.
He's probably thinking, I want the ball to go in the hoop to score the points.
Yeah.
To win the game. You know, I know that he's a very smart, like both of these, you know, Serena Williams, Steph Curry, insert whatever athlete. I'm not saying that they're not intelligent people or anything. They are. A lot of them are really smart people. Mm-hmm. But the way to get their body to do the thing that they want to do probably is more simple commands. And sometimes probably they're not even really thinking, you know?
Right. Well, they're thinking, their brain's doing a lot of the work for them.
Right.
And yeah, we're getting into the difference of like a semantic memory that's got a label and procedural memory, a complete objective. And if you go and complete objective, then your brain at some base level of that you're not actively thinking about in words and sentences is finding the path of least resistance to complete thing through those procedural memories, muscle memory, extemporaneous action, implicit memory, whatever you want to call it. That's going to go a lot faster than you thinking the words "don't chew" or whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish in your head.
Or don't make this, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's, you know, it's a long. You know, we talked a lot about that question, but I think it's something that we could all extrapolate into other areas of our playing, or even life in general. There's a lot of times where I think that this sort of line of thinking has helped me do a thing better. Again, I don't claim, find the video where I say I'm the best player. Hopefully that's not in there anywhere. I don't think it is. I don't claim to be the best tuba player, the best trombone player, the best euphonium player, the best whatever. I don't claim to be the best teacher, but to try to play my best, which is ultimately all I can do, is try to be the best me I can be. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's ultimately true. And be the best version of yourself with those sorts of things. There is an optimal way. There is science behind, and sometimes I like to get in the weeds with some of the science stuff. Connor and I've definitely had some talks of like, even when we were talking about the like trombone, the alto trombone thing, it's like we got kind of on the sciencey side of things. We could have gone a little bit deeper. We could go all about all the ratios and things that are involved, and Pythagoras discovering the harmonic series. There's a lot more we could go into that.
All
stuff.
right, buddy.
But you know what I mean? It's like there's a time and a place for that. Ultimately, I don't think a lot about Pythagoras when I'm playing.
Right. This is the safe space to do that. And this is the great time to be asking these questions in the chat so that we can really get into the weeds. And we're staying on it for a long time because I think it's just kind of fun. It's super fun to talk about these types of things.
Right.
And we do this. And I think that's a great reason to have this LBU studio class, is so that we can get into the weeds and talk about it now, so that none of us have to sit there and think so much while we're playing. We can all just sit down, make the music come out.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the best players do know a lot about what's going on. That's an important kind of thing to say with this. I'm not trying to make the claim that these people are just magically good and they don't know anything about what's going on. My argument is they're probably not thinking about it that much when they're actively doing the thing. And I think that sometimes that's why you get people who are really, really good players and not so great teachers. I think that's a thing that's not really talked about. And I'm not trying to, say, oh, this person who plays in this orchestra is not a good teacher or whatever. But ultimately, they're not the same thing. There's definitely overlap, and a lot of the best players are really good teachers, but it's just not quite that simple. And one of the things that I think about is when I'm teaching, is it ultimately doesn't, when I'm teaching a student, me demonstrating and being able to show them that I can do this doesn't necessarily help them, Right. And that's one thing with Don Little, kind of my major tuba professor for most of my college, upbringing. He always talks about that his teaching got better when he stopped playing as much in lessons. He's not the youngest teacher in the world. He doesn't, in my studies with him, I think the first lesson I had, he played. I think that since then he hasn't. He obviously still taught me something, I think he was, and he talks about, because I caught him later in his teaching career, and we have especially as a doctorate student, most of the time I'm not just like going in there and saying, hey, what fingering should I use for this note? Theoretically, we should be past a lot of those sorts of details at this point in time, and a lot of it is, a lot of times I'll go in there and say, hey, I'm having this student, I might, if Brady, if you were my student and I noticed that, I might say, hey, Don, this student is chewing every articulation. I haven't said anything yet. How would you go about teaching that? And those are the sorts of conversations that we would have. And, in my studies with him when I was an undergrad, there were lots of times looking back that I could see that he was thinking about something else, of like, he could have said this, but instead he said this.
Right.
Like a great example of, he's someone who's taught me how to teach someone who has a double buzz. And, because I've had some students that have had that situation come up where they're getting a double buzz, and I've talked to him about it. It's like, yeah, this person's getting a double buzz, and it sounded kind of weird. And he was like, well, ask them what they're practicing and how they're practicing. And assuming the student is honest, a lot of times when I've asked that question, it's, oh, I've been playing a lot of loud stuff. I've been doing a lot of this, a lot of that, a lot of loud, high, low playing, just like the extremes. And a lot of times, through having, a more masterful teacher help me teach, I've been able to teach someone to get rid of that by kind of saying things like, what if we just play mezzo piano this whole lesson? Why don't you go a whole, do you have any concerts coming up? Great. Let's play a whole week. You don't play louder than mezzo piano. Do you get in trouble in ensemble for not playing loud enough? Nod your head, keep playing mezzo piano. I've had those sort of conversations with students, concerned about the long term, not the short term. Another example is sometimes I'll have a student where it's just like, we're just going to play with a straight tone. Again, notice I didn't say no vibrato. We're going to spend a week and you're just, going to play with a straight tone. And then we add the vibrato back and things like that, and we'll find that we're probably not overusing it as much, or we're using it in a little bit more of a artful way. Juan has some comments. All my practice consists of excerpts. Not very good, but I'm being honest, and that's a very important thing with teaching lessons, and something that you learn how to pick up with students when they're lying to you, and it's not like they're saying all the time, like, oh, I really practiced this, it's like when they didn't. That does happen, but it's important to be honest with your teachers, I think, and I wouldn't say that I was always honest with your teacher, because I think when you're younger you think it's an adversarial relationship. Did you practice this? Just like, let's hear your scales, I want to see if you practiced it. And one of the things, again, I hate naming my teachers, but I also don't want to not show that I didn't just come up with things, because I know people are just like, insert famous player here, and it's just like, well, so and so told me this, but it's also important to understand that there's a lineage to some of this teaching, and they probably didn't come up with it either. Some things are somewhat come up with on your own, but a lot of them it's you heard this from this person, you combine them, and then it's something new. But one of the things that I lost my train of thought.
It's okay. So you're reminding we weren't always honest with our teachers, and
with Rex, right? So one of the things that Rex would say is that he likes to have a few different types of lessons, and one of them is you've worked really hard on this, you think you're playing it well, and let's make it better. But he also likes to have the lesson where you worked really hard on this and it's not going well. Let's fix it. And I think that some students would shy away from something like that because they wouldn't.
It's a vulnerable position to be in.
And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good saying, hey, I spent hours this week trying to learn this excerpt, trying to learn this etude. I did all the right things. I did the slow practice. I did down the octave, and it's just not working. Mm-hmm. But sometimes that your teacher needs to hear that so that they know. And ultimately, lying to them and saying I practiced when you didn't. It's like most of the time they're gonna know,
Right.
They're really just. To me, there's just life's too short to lie all the time. That's a whole nother philosophy. But I think that's something to think about with your teacher is being honest about things. And going back to Juan's comment, I think having diverse practicing stuff is really helpful. And I actually. In my perfect world, I push excerpts away as long as I can with my students. I think that's one of the best things that I did was not practice excerpts until I was absolutely forced to. I only practice excerpts as much as I absolutely had to. I hated practicing excerpts when I was younger. And I think the thing that did, because ultimately excerpts, solos, whatever the kind of the front and center thing that you're doing, to me, that's where you show how good or great of a player you are. You got to get there. And a lot of times, I've had a lot of students who, came up in a school system where it's like, do this at a very young, you need to be working on Bolero as a sophomore in high school. And there are some sophomores in high school that are ready for that, and they're going to do really well with that. I'm not trying, everyone's on their own path. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times what I'll find is people start things too young and they're bad at it it's like they, go back to their younger, less experienced self whenever that excerpt comes up, whenever that thing comes up, because they, that's, because again, that's how your brain's just like, cool, I've done this before, let's do it exactly how we did it before.
Right.
And so you could have someone who's got like the world's best articulation, but maybe they started playing Hungarian March when they were 11, and when they didn't have the world's greatest articulation, and that articulation might show its ugly head again. So that's I guess one, and Juan, I feel like you've been on a stream before, but again, I don't know everything about you. I don't know everything about everything. So surprising, maybe unsurprisingly.
There you go.
So again, it's I've been around the block, and the thing with Bolero specifically, like to zoom super far in, why I wouldn't want a student to maybe work on Bolero at a younger age, like that high D flat is not most people's best friend. Let's put it that way. Right? Is that your favorite note on the trombone, Connor?
Can't say it's my absolute favorite. My absolute favorite is going to be way lower than that.
Right. But it's a note that you and I both can play most day. It's like that's not a super scary note for us now. It definitely was at some point for both of us.
Right.
And
Definitely.
I think with excerpts like that, you might get used to missing it in a certain way, because the way your brain works when it's connecting these neurons and things, it's like, oh, cool, I just did it like that. I'll do it again. That's why, I've told this story probably on stream multiple times. I'm sure, I know I've told you, Connor. But going back to, my first kind of serious trombone teacher, Brett Schuster, and one of the things that I remember him talking about, because his son, who's now probably like in college, but his son had just started trombone when I was taking trombone lessons with him, and it's kind of hilarious because I don't know if I should tell this. It probably doesn't matter at this point, but his son in 4th grade band was playing in Eastman Shires because Dr. Schuster got that trombone, and it was just like, well, this is a trombone that someone gave me. Here you go. So that was his starter trombone, which is just kind of a goofy idea.
Nice.
I guess that sort of thing is more common now than it, especially in like the state of Texas, it's a little bit more common. But especially in Kentucky, it's like we didn't know people who were playing on Thayer valves in elementary school.
I wouldn't have known what that was.
Right. But anyway, one of the things that he would always tell me is like, this kind of doesn't, I don't know why I brought up his son. I mean, it's a funny story, but that, he would always say things like, do you make mistakes when you practice? And I would just kind of be like, yeah, like I'm not, it's like, sorry, I'm not perfect. It was like, that was my like 16-year-old response, was just like, yeah, so like, what do you want from me? Like, of course I make mistakes. I'm learning.
Yeah.
I'm not. And he would say something like, yeah, like I don't make mistakes when I practice. And it's just like, yeah, that's great. That's why I pay you every week. That's why I come here. That's why I drive to your house. And it's like you're the superior player. That's what I thought in my head. And he was just kind of, he could probably see me thinking that, and he was just kind of like, no, that you're missing the point. That's not why I'm saying that. The point is, I don't allow myself to make mistakes. And this is I'm sure he still makes mistakes in his practice, but this is a teaching moment or a teaching method, and he would say that he doesn't make mistakes because he takes things down an octave. He plays things slower. He changes the key on something, and like Bolero is a perfect thing. Sure, practice Bolero. If that D flat is hard for you, and it really is for a lot of, it's not the easiest thing. I'm fine with you practicing Bolero. Why don't we play it down an octave for most of it and jump the octave when it gets lower at the end so we're not in the basement? Or change the key, take it down a fourth, take it down a fifth, whatever the case may be. Learning the rep it and understanding what's going on, I think, is great at a young age. Practicing mistakes is, everyone always says practice makes perfect, and that's incorrect from my vantage point. I try not to say definite things. But from my vantage point, perfect practice makes perfect, because practice makes permanent. So if you're doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get really good at missing that high D flat.
Right, you got to play a lot of B naturals there.
I know some people who are really good at missing that B flat or that D flat.
I play a great B natural at the top of the Bolero. It's resonant, it sings. That's a great point. However, whatever you're doing in the practice room, you're adding money into that habit bank account. Whichever one it is,
right.
You're putting another coin into
good or
the
bad
chip note account. And you're going to have that little memory in your brain is going to be sealed, and you're going to have that procedure just on fire.
And that's
you
not,
might get a few correct notes,
right?
You know,
and that's not to say it can't ever be solved, but man, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to fix something than it is to, start with something being correct, being right. And I think that's important point too. It's like, when did you start practicing Bolero?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I bet had I known about Bolero when I was a sophomore in high school, I would have tried it out.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing I should say. This stands testament to Juan's playing. Even if I had known about it, I wouldn't have been able to play it. So kudos for you for even like being in that space. Like I know I couldn't have.
And ultimately, we don't really know Juan's playing. Again, shameless plug. If you want to, record Bolero and we'll listen to it. And
I would love to hear it.
Use the Google Drive link or the Google Forms thing, whatever it's called. I know all the things, all the Google things. But yeah, so Bolero specifically, I didn't start playing that till grad school. I didn't work on my classical trombone excerpts in high school or in college, really.
Here's something that I think might give us some middle ground here, and it goes into your teaching philosophy of pushing a positive. What's like something actionable that we can do to stop taking away something? Like, are we telling you to stop practicing Bolero? No. I think what we're saying is, in addition to you exploring Bolero and having fun with Bolero, because if excerpts are what makes your light bulb ding, ding, ding go off,
right?
You need to go chase that dopamine like you've never chased it before. Like, that's important. What we're saying is what would be, if I could go back and do it all again and I was learning Bolero for the first time, what I would do is find the most perfect version of Bolero, or what do I need to do to Bolero? How do I need to modify it that I'm playing it perfect every time? And there's going to be a little Goldilocks, whether it be for me taking it down an octave. I certainly would, have a much better go.
Your batting average goes up.
Absolutely. So there's probably a key or an octave. There's going to be your Goldilocks zone for Bolero. And I would say celebrating the practice of playing it perfectly is just as important as getting the chops to be able to nail the E flat. But that exercise of because excerpts are they're a big mental kind of concept game. And I'm not someone that should know exercises that much, but the idea of always practicing with that intention and finding your perfect version of that. That's kind of that's the game of excerpts, right? It's, so play that game while you're exploring and having fun with Bolero. Find your perfect Bolero. It's probably going to be in a different key. I know mine would be. Mine would be lower.
Right. Even today, my gliss from B flat to D flat down an octave, it's pretty good. Not to brag, but it's pretty good.
Right.
It's a lot. I do it well a lot more times than I do the high octave. And that's the thing too. It's the kind of the tuba excerpt that comes up like that is bead low. It's I've had so many tuba students who come in that they're just especially it happens with younger students when they get their first F tuba, or they rented an F tuba from the school or something like that. This is a scenario that's happened with 4 or 5 students that I've taught over the years, and just now I can play Bolero, or now I can play bead low, both B's, and they'll maybe get that high G sharp sometimes not. It's just I'm all for you practicing bead low, just do it down an octave for a while, because we can work on that range with exercises. We can work on it with etudes that I don't want to say don't matter, but are you going to play Bordoni insert number here up an octave in a performance? Probably not.
Yeah, likely not.
If we practice that in a way that we're doing damage to that etude, throw that etude away, rip it out of the book. And especially with exercises, are you ever going to be playing your gliss exercises, 7-1 up there in performance? I mean, maybe there's some crazy piece that might have that, but for the most part, that's to me where we get better, and that's how we do that. And then, because I've talked about this with, and I think the first person who put this idea in my head was Carl Kleinstuber, who's a great tuba player. And I remember him saying when I was studying with him that like if you're a good player, if you're a really excellent player, excerpts are easy. And the point that I think he's trying to make is like, yeah, let's get, because he would make me come into lessons and it's like he would just pull out the Bordoni book and we do these things where we just like change octaves, high, low, whatever, just like, you know, just like do whatever. And it's just like, yeah, if you can do all that and it's really easy, you know, Biela's not that hard, Bolero's not that hard. You got full command of your full range, and you know that, and range is a really simple, you know, thing. We could take that same approach with articulations. Like if your articulation isn't super solid, you know, Hungarian march is going to be hard. You know, all of the Italian trombone thing, you know, all of those are going to be really hard. But you can practice in that articulation and not get it to go so well. Whereas you could practice your scales, you can do all this other stuff and work on that and get it to be much better. So it seems like that was helpful to Juan. You know, that's my 2 cents on it. And you know, I think ultimately it came from me being defiant and probably not being the easiest student to teach. I definitely don't. Of all the things that I claim to not be the best at, I definitely don't claim that I was the easiest student to teach. I'd argue that I was a difficult student to teach. I maybe still am in some ways. But
somehow I think that might be the case.
Yeah, I've learned to mask it, I guess, a little bit more. That's ultimately probably what it is. But you know, I didn't want to practice excerpts, so I didn't. And even, you know, when I was an undergrad at UNT, we'd have mock orchestral auditions and things, and I would do them, especially like my first couple of years. I'd get by. I wouldn't practice it as much as I, quote unquote, should. And then even in grad school, I really didn't do it that much until the end. And then, you know, when I started my doctorate, and again, it doesn't need, you know, this seems very linear. It's not quite so simple and so linear. But, you know, it's like I eventually practiced these excerpts, a lot of these excerpts, once I could play I had a command over the instrument to do them better. Like, I think a perfect example of an excerpt that would have been really hard for me if I had been exposed to it earlier is the dragon solo, or whatever I confused the dragon solo for before on that one stream.
The darker song?
The darker song, yeah, but the actual dragon solo from Rheingold. It starts on a low E flat, and my low range, especially when I was in high school into early college, and even part of my master's, I kind of hid that it was bad for a long time. I didn't really get good at it for a long time. And then eventually I got a lot better at it. And then I think when I was exposed to that, I probably should have learned it earlier. I should have been aware of it earlier. I probably had heard it, but I, wasn't paying attention or whatever. And I learned it really like once I started my doctorate, which like probably any like collegiate tuba professors was like, it took you that long to be kind of exposed to it. It's like, yeah, it wasn't on any of the orchestral auditions that I took up until that point. Like, no one called it on a mock audition. Again, I should have been more aware of, all of the main excerpts from the ring cycle. I mean, I heard all the ring cycle. I even played through it probably. I probably didn't notice because it has an octave below, 8 VB. I probably just didn't notice it when I played it through. But I guess my point is, by the time that I learned that excerpt, I was much better at the low range. I was much better at playing soft in the low range. And that excerpt wasn't that hard for me then. But I probably could have practiced it in a way where it would still be hard for me today had I really, really focused on it. So, it's a tricky thing. We should probably call it, it's been 2 hours. We're just hitting the 2 hour mark. So we should probably call the stream there, especially because we should save some topics for later. We don't want to use all the topics on studio class number 2. What are we going to talk about in studio class number 3? But I think that a lot of this stuff is really important. Some good kind of food for thought. But yeah, do you have any closing remarks? I kind of started dominating the conversation towards the end.
No, that was good. I think you said a lot of great things. I like the point of excerpts being like it's a way to show the musicianship that you already have outside of the excerpt. It's intended to be a proof of concept. I think a lot of times maybe it's not, or maybe it's not focused on in that sort of way.
Right.
But that's a good thought to kind of keep in our head as we explore orchestral excerpts. And I think if we're calling people out or encouraging them to play the bolero for us next week for the video submissions. I think I might try. I'm gonna see if I can find a key for me that I can do it without. It might be fun for me to. I might try to find out where's my sweet spot on bolero, like as far as like the range. I haven't done that in a really long time.
And that's the thing, one of the great things about when we both went to UNT, making us play tunes in all 12 keys. Sorry, I've got to pick up the Velcro that I've been fidgeting with for no reason. I have to fidget, but yeah. So playing things like that in all 12 keys. There's certain things that, like Ride of the Valkyries in the key of B flat minor. It's a lot different than B minor. Like it makes things a lot. There's certain things, especially on like a C tuba, that are less hard. When you take away, you kind of alter, you change some of them to this, but there's certain notes that pop out a lot easier because of that, and then you can kind of extrapolate that. So it's not even just like you can't play in this range. Certain things get easier. You kind of trick your brain. I'm very big into tricking my own brain and definitely tricking the brains of my students, or kind of not always being forthright with what our goal is with an activity. It's just why don't you try this? Like this week, only play Ride of the Valkyries up a step. Only play it down a step. Like things like that. But yeah, playing excerpts in all 12 keys is something I'm a pretty big advocate for, especially really high ones. But also like Mahler 1 is a great example, and then we will call this stream. Mahler 1 on tuba is a great example. Because it's so simple, it's essentially a minor scale. Even if you're not really good at playing in all 12 keys, it's really just a minor scale, and that was a terrible performance of it. I promise I play more accurate notes on the tuba. But anyway, that's a perfect one because most of us can kind of think through a minor scale and then play. And it's a great way to kind of get the brain going. And then I start down an octave, I go up in half steps, and then I arrive at the key that it's actually in. And even though that's not so high for some of us on the tuba, sometimes it's really helpful to have it not even, to go an octave below, go a fourth below or something, where it's going to be even easier. Again, an oversimplification, but yeah, we should call the stream there. It's been 2 hours. Hopefully this was good. And James, I'm sorry that you missed the stream. To be fair, it's on an off day. We're definitely curious with what some of you all think. Think tomorrow you couldn't do it, and then next week I can't do Wednesday night, and then the week after we're not really sure what we're doing. So the next week will be on Tuesday again, and I think our current goal is to try to move it so that Connor and I can both do it as our kind of primary solution to life being, getting in the way. Like today I had jury duty. I can't plan around jury duty, although it didn't affect the stream. It's just like things happen, but I'd like there to always be a stream if possible. So like the end of the month, I might not be able to be there, but I'm thinking about having Connor and a guest host do it if we can figure out all the technical things, or maybe I can figure out the internet situation at some of my family members' houses that I believe to have questionable internet quality. Not to call anybody out.
Name any names. Yeah.
But live streaming video, especially in what I hope to be high quality, is it takes some bandwidth, and not everybody has bandwidth. Both of us are fortunate that we have high quality internet. You actually more high quality than mine, but
Well, not to brag.
Yeah, not to brag. Eventually, we'll all have the fastest fiber internet, but that's not today. That's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, we'll call the stream there. Thank you to everyone who asked. We had some really, really great questions.
Great questions today. This was fun.
You always hear teachers in classes say there are no stupid questions, and the only stupid questions are the ones you don't ask and things like that. And it's true. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. If Brady didn't ask that question about chewing the articulations, we wouldn't have answered it. I wasn't going to think about that on my own. Connor probably wasn't going to think about it on his own. But I think that we probably helped, probably not just Brady, but maybe some other people. You know, not maybe, you know, we didn't solve world hunger or anything, but we at least gave some ideas to think about. Maybe we didn't solve any problems or solve the situation necessarily. But you know, we like to have questions. It makes our job a little bit easier too. With things, you know, and also it's things that hopefully you care about because you asked the question. So, you know, we'll be here next week. You know, come with your questions if you think about them. And again, I try to check that Google Drive or Google Doc. Or no, it's not Google Doc. Google Form. Google Form with all of the playing stuff. So if you want us to feature your playing, you know, record a video, tell us what it is, what you're doing it for, all those things that are very clearly, or I think clearly, in the Google Form. And hopefully we'll get some submissions and can start doing some more of those. So yeah. So any closing remarks from you, Connor, or should we call a stream there?
Call it.
All right. So we'll see everyone next week. Same bat time, same bat channel as this week, but not as the normal one. So hopefully we'll be back to normal at least by once July starts. But you know, again, we're two people with. Believe it or not, although that Low Brass U is now monetized, this stream is not the way that Connor and I pay our bills. Maybe at some point, but probably not anytime soon. So we'll see everybody next week. All right.
Yep.
Catch you later.
See you later, friends and neighbors.
Boom.